Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Gwinnett County Public Library for our program, The History of Ice Cream, with author Suzanne Woods Fisher. My name is Miriam Mayer, and I am an adult services specialist for Gwinnett County Public Library. Today, we are joined by author Suzanne Woods Fisher, who will discuss the history of ice cream and her latest romance novel, The Secret to Happiness, part of the Cape Cod Creamery book series. Now I would like to introduce our author. Suzanne Woods Fisher is the award-winning, best-selling author of more than 30 books, including The Moonlight School, The Sweet Life, and The Secret to Happiness, as well as The Three Sisters Island and the Inn at Eagle Hill series. She is also the author of several nonfiction books about the Amish, including Amish Peace and Amish Proverbs. She lives in California. Please welcome Suzanne Woods Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me. And I am going to share the screen now so that we can work on our presentation and share it with you. There we go. And this is a presentation about the curious history of ice cream. And the reason that ice cream is on my mind has to do with this series, the Cape Cod Creamery series, and starting with book 1 on the left is The Sweet Life, and that released a year ago. And then on the right is The Secret to Happiness, and that just released a few weeks ago. The third book has been written and it's been accepted by my editor, and now it's kind of in the back of the house at Revell Books. And all I know about it is that it's been given a title. It's called Love on a Whim. I do know what the story is, and it's really fun, and it's a great kind of wrap up to a series. Well, this series is about a mom and her young adult daughter who are both in need of a little respite from life's bumps and bruises, and they end up on Cape Cod, and the mom finds this dilapidated old ice cream shop and is convinced she can just bring it back to life. Because after all, she thinks it's going to be easy. Who doesn't love ice cream? Everybody loves ice cream. And sure, that's true. That is true. But ice cream can be tricky. And I say this with some authority because my husband, Steve, is a serious ice cream maker. He's a serious guy to begin with. And he takes ice cream very seriously. In fact, we call his ice cream Steve's Serious Ice Cream, as kind of a play on him and a play on his ice cream. And while Steve was working on his vanilla recipe, he experimented 59 times before he got it right, until he was finally satisfied. 59 times. Other flavors like chocolate or mocha or vanilla, or I'm sorry, not vanilla, like mint chocolate chip or, lemon, strawberry, all those stronger flavors, they can mask a lot of the inferior ingredients. They can mask the ice cream maker's mistakes. Not vanilla. Vanilla is so pure, it's the hardest flavor to make, full of integrity. Well, and I probably just ruined all other kinds of ice creams for you now too. Well, where did all these ice cream makers get their start, including my husband? And I'm talking about Baskin and Robin and Ben and Jerry and Jenny Splendid, and there might be some in Georgia that I'd love to hear about at the end of our presentation. Where did these greats get their start? I wonder if you know that there's such a thing as ice cream school. Penn State University has ice cream school. They have it in January for obvious reasons, because that is when an ice cream maker has a little bit of spare time. And it has been going on since 1892, every January, bar 1 year, and I believe that was the pandemic year. But this is where people have been and where they have learned. They have a long course in January for like people who are actually running their own businesses. And then they have a short course, which my husband went to, which is for really serious hobbyists. So anyway, that's one interesting little thing about ice cream. And let's move on to ice cream now. Whoops, sorry. went too fast. So there's several myths about the origins of ice cream, and nobody really knows for sure where ice cream first began, when it first began, but there are hints of it in ancient history. And its earliest form probably holds very little resemblance to what we know of as ice cream today. But the very first mention of a frozen dessert dates back to Persia in 550 BCE with an invention called a yakchal. And this had to do with a type of refrigeration, because remember, ice cream is all about refrigeration. Persians enjoyed something called a sharbat, which is probably a little bit like our sherbet. And they use sugar and water and flavoring to make it. They had access to sugar because they traded with the Indian Empire. Well, there's even a biblical reference to King Solomon enjoying a cold flavored drink during harvest. That's in the book of Proverbs. And then during the Roman Empire, we have Nero, who brought ice down. He sent his runners up into the mountains and they brought back ice, or snow actually. And that was then flavored with honey and wine. And Nero stored the ice in deep pits covered with straw, which is actually, that practice of ice keeping is still, used today. Well, then there are those who insist that ice cream first came out of China. And there's a reference to a milk and a rice dish found in China in 200 BCE. And it's thought that ice cream was introduced then to Italy and subsequently all of Europe because of Marco Polo's travels. Well, moving along in history, we have in 1565, there's an architect, Bernardo Buontalenti, who invented an advanced refrigeration technique that allowed ice cream to be more commonly used by the Italians during the Renaissance period. And in the 1600s, the very first ice cream dish in Italy was invented. And I'm talking about ice cream more as we are knowing ice cream to be. And this is when Caterina de' Medici held a competition for new and unique dishes to be presented at court. Well, last part of the old world we have, oh no, not quite last. During the late 1700s, Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, was so infatuated with ice cream that she owned a special ice cream service set made of this elegant Sèvres porcelain. And you can go online and see this porcelain. It's just beautiful. So you can see the interest in ice cream and how it is just spreading around the world. And now we go into Turkey, where they've been making ice cream for at least 300 years, something called dondurma, made from flour milled from wild orchids. Isn't that, it's so interesting how the ingenuity of people. Well, regardless of the origins of where it came from or when, we know it's spreading fast. We know that a love of ice cream has been around for a very, very long time. So now let's move from the old world to the new world. And there is a thought that it's impossible to say exactly when the first ice cream came into the colonies, but it's likely arrived with European settlers in the early 1700s. By this time, several books on confectionaries had been produced, meaning recipe books, and they included recipes for ices as well as ice creams. So some think that it was the Quaker colonists who brought the ice cream from England, and others believe that it was the French that were the first to bring ice cream to America. Probably they're both right. They probably came into the colonies in different ports and spread fast. Well, a couple things we know for sure though. Ice cream really was initially a frozen dessert for the wealthy only. And we can make several assumptions that are probably realistic based on that. One, you would have needed to own a cow or probably two, and that wasn't true of all families. If they did have a cow, they needed all that milk that was produced for their own needs. It required large quantities of sugar, which was an imported commodity, and as well as salt, which was also imported. And it required making Making ice cream also required ice, which meant that it had to be cut on a river and hauled up and held in an ice house in hopes that it could last from winter when it was hauled up into summer. And most early Americans didn't have the luxury of ice houses at all. Plus, ice cream took and still takes a fair amount of work, and most families couldn't afford the time for either a family member, or if they did have a servant, for that servant to waste time making what would have been considered sort of a frivolous dish. But we know of one American who loved ice cream, and that is George Washington. He loved ice cream so much that he even took ice cream making equipment from Mount Vernon to the Capitol when he became president. There were many accounts of ice cream, and he spelled it CREEM, not EAM, and served during his administration. Now, in the summer of 1790, there was a New York merchant who had an ice cream shop, and he confided that George Washington had spent $200 on ice cream in one summer in his shop. And that is worth about $5,000 today. Inventory records of Mount Vernon also show that he had several ice cream pots made from tin and pewter. Thomas Jefferson is said to have kept several ice houses, and he was able to bring in 62 wagon loads of ice that could then make copious amounts of ice cream. So something kind of interesting I find about Thomas Jefferson, he had a chef that he sent to France to be trained. And this was the first time from America that a chef was going to be trained in France. This chef brought home with him macaroni and cheese, whipped cream, and vanilla ice cream. So Jefferson's chef was the name of James Hemings. And I don't know if that rings a bell to you, but I bet it will in a second. So he was the first trained American chef trained in France. He was also enslaved by Jefferson. James Heming, if his surname sounds familiar, was the older brother of Sally Hemings, who was Jefferson's enslaved concubine and who bore him 4 children. Now we're moving along. We have Dolly Madison. She loved ice cream. She actually served it at her husband's inaugural ball. Now, common flavors at this time were soft fruits like peaches and strawberries that would be added to a vanilla custard, because basically, even today, all ice cream boils down to a vanilla custard or a chocolate custard base, and then things are added into it. Well, Dolly, though, added a very curious flavor: oysters. She loved oyster ice cream. I don't know what you think about that. But another great American who loved ice cream was Abraham and Mary Lincoln. Before and during his presidency, President Lincoln would frequently host strawberry parties for friends when in Illinois and then in Washington when strawberries came into season, and fresh ripe strawberries were served with cake as well as, you guessed it, ice cream. We're going to back up in history just a decade or two for something that has happened to ice cream. And this is a woman in Philadelphia, a housewife named Nancy Johnson. Must have been a pretty good tinkerer, because she created the very first hand-cranked ice cream churn, filed a patent for it. I love this story. And she basically, that pattern, what she has designed is still used today. This is the hand-cranked ice cream churn that we still use today. She made such a significant impact in the world of ice cream because ice cream had only been for the wealthy. It was now available and affordable for everyone. Huge impact. And with this, America's love affair with ice cream was off and running. America's oldest ice cream brand is Bassett's, which started in 1861 in Philadelphia. And probably that has something to do with Nancy Johnson, coming right out of Philadelphia. Well, with the availability of ice cream becoming wide and deep and all that in the late 19th centuries, it led to new creations. And in 1874, the American soda fountain shop emerged, and with it, the profession of the soda jerk, with the idea of the invention of the ice cream soda. Now, curiously, there was backlash to this. And in response to religious criticism for eating the sinfully rich ice cream sodas on Sundays, ice cream merchants then left out the carbonated water and they tweaked it to become the ice cream sundae, changing the spelling a little to avoid any connection with the Sabbath. And somehow that is the invention of the ice cream sundae. Now, by the end of the 1800s, this I find so interesting. Street vendors, picture like those little push carts, were selling ice cream on the streets. And they would sell them in these little small glass containers that were called penny licks. Well, as the name suggests, for the price of 1 penny, you get a few licks of ice cream. And the customers would lick it clean and hand it back to the vendor, hopefully cleaning it before it was used again, but not always. Penny licks were eventually banned because there were concerns about the spread of tuberculosis and cholera. And just a tip, you can look on eBay and find these antique penny licks. Well, this brings us now to the ice cream cone. And we're moving along, as legend has it, to the World's Fair in St. Louis in 1904. Two concessionaires right next to each other. One was an ice cream maker, one was a waffle maker. And the vendor who was making ice cream ran out of his containers to sell, and the waffle concessionaire looked over, saw his problem, took a warm waffle, put it in that elliptical cone, handed it to him, and voila, we now have an edible container for ice cream ever since. So moving along in history, we're now in the early 1900s, when prohibition laws had banned alcohol sales in the 1920s. Americans turned to ice cream. Its popularity is growing and growing, and breweries were even converted to ice cream making. In the 1920s also, as immigrants arrived at Ellis Island, they were fed ice cream sandwiches in their very first meal, kind of a way to introduce them to American culture and its sweetness. And this, I don't know if you'll appreciate this or not. I think you all know the phrase, that song, "I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream." It comes from a song written by a trio in 1927. It's one of those songs that kind of keeps running through your head over and over. So I apologize if that's what's happened to you today. So now we go into the 1930s with the Depression. And what do you think has happened with ice cream in the Depression? Novelty. Rocky Road was originally marketed as a metaphor for coping with the economic crash. In the 1940s, as World War II reaches our shores, we are seeing ice cream as an edible moral symbol. This is very interesting, I think. American bombers actually put little strapped ice cream buckets on their plane, which would then freeze in high altitudes as they flew over enemy territory. Every branch of the military tried to outdo each other in serving ice cream to its troops, because remember, sugar would have been rationed during this time. So ice cream was especially a privilege. And in 1945, the first floating ice cream parlor was built for sailors in the Pacific. So now we have the end of World War II. Sugar is no longer rationed, life is starting to rebuild, and ice cream is rolling forward. Americans in 1946 consumed 20 quarts of ice cream per person. I want you to think about that, 20 quarts of ice cream per person in 1946. Today, the average American eats Oops, sorry. I'm not sure I have a slide for that. The average American eats 23 pounds of ice cream every year. Just a few years ago, that statistic was 22 pounds. So we are heading in that direction. It's rising. And compare that to the end of World War II, where people ate only 20 quarts per year. Amazing. So the average dairy cow produces enough milk over her lifetime to create 7,500 gallons of ice cream. And today, a staggering 9% of cow's milk production is dedicated to ice cream. So everybody has sort of a favorite brand of ice cream, and usually it's regional. And this is what I'm curious about for your area. If you have a regional brand that you love, and I'd love to hear it, and flavors too, if you have unique flavors. But the majority of ice cream businesses have been in business for more than 50 years, and many of them are still owned by single families. Artisan made ice cream is on the rise. Salt and Straw, based in Portland, Oregon. I don't know if you've ever heard of this company. It's up and down the West Coast now, but it started in Portland with bone marrow ice cream. They have all kinds of unique things seasonally, invented. They are a kick just to watch, and they have lines out the door the minute they open to the last hour moment at night. They are so unique and interesting. But over in Italy, same thing's happening, where you have 19,000 gelaterias, hope I pronounced that correctly, that employ almost 70,000 people. And just like in America, most of them are small and family-owned businesses. Well, ice cream isn't just Americans' favorite frozen dessert. Other countries have a claim on it too. Italy has gelato, Japan has mochi or mochi. If you know how to spell that, please let me know how to pronounce it. India has kulfi. This sweet stuff gets around. So with that, I'd love to just have a little bit of ice cream trivia and see what you know. So here we go. Grab your spoon. Let's dig in. Did you know that vanilla is the most favorite ice cream flavor in the entire world? The entire world. And remember, it is the hardest flavor to make too. Did you know that gelato, this is the difference between gelato and ice cream. It contains a third less sugar and half the fat of ice cream. Did you know that it takes 3 gallons of whole milk to create 1 gallon of ice cream? Did you know that the country that consumes the most ice cream is not the United States, but in fact, it's New Zealand, with an average of 7.5 gallons per person. So what do you think the second country would be? And if you guessed the United States, you were right. An average of 5.5 gallons per person. That's 44 pints. So think of what you buy in the store of those specialty ice creams. 44 in a year. That's the average. So did you know that ice cream headache is a real thing? Did you know that when the astronauts go into outer space, the thing they miss most on their missions is ice cream, and the other two is pizza, and the last thing is soda? Did you know that we have National Ice Cream Month in July? President Ronald Reagan signed that in 1984. Did you know that about 50% of the volume in ice cream is pure air, and that's what gives the frozen dessert its light texture? And fact number 10, did you know that ice cream sales tend to increase during times of economic recession? It's kind of a recession-proof business. Well, before I turn this over, I'm going to just invite you, if you're interested, you're welcome to go to my website, suzannewoodsfisher.com/gift, and you can download a PDF of Thomas Jefferson's recipe for vanilla ice cream, just for fun, and see if it's anything you like. One thing I forgot to mention before I hand it over is this series, this book, The Sweet Life, book one, its film rights have been optioned for a television or movie, and we'll see where that goes, but I will keep you posted. And again, you're welcome to join my mailing list if you'd like to, and you can get updates and find out what's going on with all this. So with that, I am going to stop sharing the screen and pass it back, and we have some time for some questions. And I see some questions too.
Hey, yes. If anybody has any questions, please type them into the Q&A box or into the chat box. But I had a question for you, Suzanne. You mentioned oyster ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
My question is, can you make any type of ice cream, or are there limits to what kind of flavors you can make for ice cream?
That is a very good question. So I mentioned that most all ice cream is a base of vanilla or chocolate. And they're often, sad to say, I mean, I shouldn't say it's sad, but every ice cream shop you go into has probably bought a pre-made base, and they will churn it and add all the textures into it, like Oreo cookies or, you know, mint chocolate chips or the flavoring. So think of almost anything you can think of that you might want to add in to that vanilla custard base. For example, like oyster, which sounds really savory, but but it's almost like an endless option depending on your taste buds. No, I'm not sure it's going to work. And ice cream is finicky. It is not easy. I think it is a very I mean, to have that kind of repetition where in a shop where it is coming out the same flavor every time, that's a big deal. I see my husband just tortured with his thermometers. He makes a salted caramel that would just, oh, it's just incredible. And if it goes a little too long, it gets acrid, it gets a little burnt, it- that aftertaste. So I think the possibilities are limitless, but hopefully good judgment prevails.
Yeah. No.
Not sure about oyster.
Yeah, that's probably an acquired taste. I know I had some ice cream. I want to say it's called Leopold's in Savannah, Georgia.
Right. Been there.
Yeah, I
Yes.
there's a line out the door every time,
Yes.
probably like all day long. And I had some lavender ice cream, and I have not been able to find lavender ice cream anywhere else near me up here in Atlanta area. And I'm craving
Okay.
it ever since I had it.
Well, by any chance, was it lavender honey?
It might have been.
'Cause a lot of times lavender and honey are paired together because lavender can get soapy, kind of like rosemary. You have to be careful with that, but a little bit of it, sort of like rose, a little bit is wonderful.
I was very pleasantly surprised that I liked it because there are some lavender cleaning products that are a little too strong for me, or I really enjoyed it. But we do have one question and comment. Congratulations on your upcoming movie or TV series.
Thank
What
you. Thank you.
is your favorite ice cream?
Well, the salted caramel of my husband's is really, really good. It's one of those like one bite leads to another bite. You just do another, do another. He is quite a perfectionist. So I would have to say my husband, Steve's Serious Salted Caramel Ice Cream. I'm curious if people put in the chat, if you've had a really unique flavor, or if there's one near your area that you would recommend, because this is the fun of being a writer where I'm kind of isolated. I love what I do so much, but connecting with people is the joy of this. And I'm meeting people I never would have met, even through Zoom. And so yesterday I had an event and heard about a rice and beans ice cream up in Ohio and a corn and cinnamon ice cream. The other day I was talking in Kansas, and there's one ice cream shop that does a pork butt and barbecue sauce, and they only do it like once a year. It's sort of like a specialty in either August or September, and just they can't keep it in. People are lined up before they even open the doors. Isn't that funny? I
Wow.
love that kind of curious.
I definitely think it depends on where you're from in the country.
Yeah, very regional tastes. I agree, which is sort of fun, you know?
Yeah. Um, Linda Moser comments that there's a Thai chili restaurant in Atlanta that serves ginger ice cream by Greenwood Ice Cream.
Oh, thank you, Linda. I'm going to write that down because I know people in Atlanta and I'd love to see if
Yeah.
they.
I don't know if Greenwood Ice Cream is open anymore, but so that was I know that was like a local ice cream producer, Greenwood. I think they were located in Chamblee or Brookhaven, Georgia, but maybe they might have moved.
You know your ice creams.
Yeah. I didn't know why. I do know so much about ice cream. Um, and we do have a comment from Susan. Um, she really enjoyed the talk. She's about to rate her freezer for her favorite chocolate ice cream. She's an ice cream fan from England.
Oh, fun.
Um, and then somebody suggested that there's a French restaurant in Decatur that used to have lavender ice cream. So I might have to go and look for that.
That's good.
Oh, the French restaurant is Cafe Alsace.
Alsace, yeah.
Great.
French.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to look out for that. Well, if anybody has any other questions, does anyone have any other questions? Well, I think
Thanks.
that's all of the questions that we have. So I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap up.
I
Susan,
see
thank
one
you.
question. JD was asking if when is book 3 coming out? Thank you so much. I have the hardest time self-promoting, so I appreciate that. And that book will be out next late April, early May. And it's a really fun, I have to say it, I am really pleased. Wrapping up a series is hard, trying to bring everybody's story kind of home for a landing and in a satisfying way. So I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. Love on a whim. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I will do a cover reveal as soon as I get the cover. It's kind of fun to see. I don't know what they're going to do between popsicles and ice cream cones. I don't know how the next one's going to look. It still is based in this little ice cream shop in Cape Cod, but I don't know what will be next.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up our program for today. Suzanne, thank you so much for your time for this wonderful presentation. I definitely learned a lot about ice cream today, and now I need some ice cream.
Yes, me too. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Have a good summer. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.